I've been informed recently that the expression "there's more than one way to bake a cake" is not a real expression, and nobody says that, and I'm the only one who's ever said that, even though I say it all the time. It sounds so much better than "there's more than one way to skin a cat." I don't want to say that. Anyway, the point is, there's more than one way to build a law firm, and that's what today's episode is all about. This is How to Start and Run a Law Firm. I'm your host, Mark Lyda. My guest today, Odelia Goldberg, is an estate planning attorney from South Florida, and her firm is completely different from my own. It looks different now, and she took a different path to get there. So today's episode is all about how there's more than one way to bake a cake. Let's dive in. Let's get cooking, actually. Odelia Goldberg is my guest today. She has a really interesting, amazing career. And one of the things that I think makes this episode so valuable is that the way you have built your firm is so different from the way I have built my firm. So I want people to know that there's more than one way to do it. So Odelia worked at IBM for much of her career. And prior to that, by the way, I heard on another podcast, was a professional model. But then she worked in IBM in the contracts and then legal department. IBM helped you get through school, getting an MBA and then your law degree. And you eventually transferred into having your own practice out of IBM. But what's really interesting is you did it through acquiring other law firms. And that's what really distinguishes, I think, your model for how you've built this thing. So I always like to start, first of all, welcome. Hello.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I always start by asking people, when did that seed start where you thought, maybe I'll start my own law firm? When did you first have that thought?
So that's a good question. I never really wanted to be a lawyer. It wasn't like that was kind of like a childhood dream of mine. As you mentioned, I was working for IBM, and IBM used to invest a lot in their employees. So they helped, get my project management certificate, a lot of continuing education. And one of the things was, getting an MBA. They paid in full for that. And then the only other evening program that I could do was law school. So right away I was like, of course, yeah, sign me up, because I'm an immigrant and I love education. And so they paid for most of that. And then I was a lawyer and I'm like, now what? Here I am working for IBM full time. And I always worked from home. Back in the 90s, I used to call it working from bed. So, for me, it was like, all right, I have this law degree. Let me just hang a shingle. So I hung a shingle up in New York and I would do, like some estate planning for my friends and family, nothing crazy. And at the time I was working, 9 to 5, which gave me a lot of time in the evening. So I started doing the continuing education programs at all the local public schools. And every mile and a half had its own district. So there would be maybe 20 districts within driving distance to my house. And I would teach 2 courses twice a year. So that was like twice a week. And, maybe 10, 20 people would show up and they paid $15. And each one of those people would become my clients. So I built up a practice in New York just by teaching these continuing education courses. So 4 or 5 years of that, we moved to Florida. And of course, we only have Broward and Miami, and it's so huge. So that model didn't really work for me. I was still working for IBM and everything was fine. But I was like, well, how am I going to get a business going if I can only teach one continuing education class at a time and 5, 10 people are going to come? So I started looking at purchasing practices, and that's kind of what happened. I left IBM in 2015, but I purchased my first law practice in 2012. So for 3 years, I had already purchased a law practice and I was working for IBM full time while running my practice. Of course, there was no conflict of interest because at IBM, I was doing contract reviews, for in-house stuff. And here at my law practice, I was doing estate planning for people. So I was able to double duty. And then it got to the point where I kind of resented my time at IBM. I was like, oh, I could be working on my own stuff. And it was time to, kind of leave the organization. And when I spoke to my manager, she said, well, you're at the point where you could retire. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm that old. But I had been there for 18 years. So it kind of made sense, So I retired from IBM and kind of put all my energy into the law practice at that point.
That is
Yeah.
so cool. So a lot of the people I've interviewed have had a sort of overlap, and that can be a really effective way to do it. Now, take us back to the continuing education classes that you were teaching. If somebody's listening to this podcast and they're thinking of how to get their practice up and running, is that a strategy you would recommend? And what are the first steps somebody could take if they wanted to do something similar? This podcast is presented by Practiced, modern law practice management software. We built Practiced at my firm because we were tired of fighting our software. Workarounds, clunky systems, way too much admin. So we built our own, and it cut our admin time by over 70%. Practiced makes running a law firm feel lighter. Intake is fast. Engagement letters just work. Time, tasks, and expenses stop piling up. And Practiced's AI assistant can do anything a human assistant can do inside the system. You can also hand it your messy notes, forms, or questionnaires, and it generates clean, polished documents using your templates. Or just forward an email and a new matter appears. Practiced even helps you get more clients through marketing and advanced referral network features. Everything works right out of the box, no separate software for intake and case management, one system, no duct tape. And it's just $20 a month. All features, no add-ons, no nickel and diming. Get started in minutes at practiced.io. That's practist.io.
Anytime anyone tells me they want to start a business, the first thing I think of is where are you going to get your clients, right?
Mm.
Because usually people start a business and they think about the logo, the name, the
Yeah.
website, and all that's fun and exciting, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
really, you have to drill down to where are the people that are going to want your service or your product? Where are they coming from, right? So for me in New York, it made a tremendous amount of sense. Like I said, every mile and a half was its own school district. So that lent itself to a lot of districts. And I would teach two courses. I would teach how to protect your loved ones and leave money to your heirs, which is a really catchy name. And then I would teach an elder law seminar. So two classes for two sessions for each one of these districts. So I was, and they would publish it back in the day. There's continuing education or their adult education programs, and they would send it out to all their people. So my name was also out there. So it was free advertising, honestly. And, these seminars are a great way to get people through the door. And if you already have a built-in mechanism of where they're going to hold the classes and, how the people are going to sign up, you don't have to, do the marketing and the soliciting of getting the people, getting the location, having someone sign them in, giving name tags, doing all these administrative stuff because the district was doing that for me. All I had to do was show up, and back in the day, I was kind of sweetening the deal and I was offering a free healthcare proxy. So come to the class. If you hate me, at least you walk out of there with a free healthcare proxy, right? Because
Nice.
back then, we didn't really need the two witnesses or the notary, or I don't remember.
Mm.
The requirements were much lower to establish
Mm.
the healthcare proxy. It was something that they could do in the hospital themselves, but it
Mm.
was kind of like a kitschy way to get people through the door. And like I said, 10, 20 people would come at a time. It
Right.
wasn't like a big windfall, like not like hundreds or thousands, but every single person that came, I would get their email address, their phone number, their address, and I would send them the Christmas lists and all that.
Mm.
And then I built up a practice in New York just by, one at a time, onesie twosie of them, so to speak.
I mean, the thing that might be sort of invisible to you is that a big accomplishment was finding that opportunity and thinking of how to do it. So the advice for people starting is to, I guess, be proactive about the research about what's happening in their community and how they could contribute to it,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's community centers, there's churches, there's synagogues, there's book clubs, there are all kinds. When I first moved to Florida, like I said, the districts didn't make sense because there was only, two that really kind of were close enough to me that I could position myself because nobody from Palm Beach, I couldn't really market myself in Palm Beach when I'm down, here in deep Broward, things like that. So one of the things I looked at was assisted living facilities because that's a lot
Yeah.
similar to so I was doing quite a bit of going to assisted living facilities and giving my presentations there. It wasn't as structured and I didn't feel like I got the rate of return because even though people would show up, they were really there just to get information. They either had their own estate plan or they weren't their decision makers. Their children or their loved ones were the ones making the decision makers. So even though I was marketing in a good way. It just wasn't the right fit for me, especially in this type of law, the estate planning field. So, yeah, you got to go out there and you have to figure out what makes sense. When I first started doing real estate, one of the things I started doing is going to the realtors have their own kind of associations down here. So I was doing a lot of continuing education for that. I also, at some point, became licensed to give accounting education. So I was going to accounting offices and, giving a lot of presentations to accountants. And then they could check off that they listened to me talk for an hour about estate planning and
Yeah.
they would get their continuing education. And so, I tried all these different avenues to see what made sense. It turns out, marketing is my jam. So
Nice.
I'm happy
Yeah.
to, talk to you about marketing for hours. But I found that really targeting estate planning lawyers looking to retire was the best approach because I do a whole comedy routine about how all the estate planning lawyers are retiring to be DJs. How everyone's looking to be a DJ, but especially estate planning lawyers. I know so many. So, it's not a
Is that
field that a
true?
lot
Are
of
you
people,
serious?
yeah, I know like three. Yeah.
Really?
Well, everybody wants to be a DJ lately. I don't know if you
Really?
noticed. Yeah,
I did not
the
know
whole
that.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, go on.
Um, so yeah, it's not a field that a lot of people want to get into. Every summer we get interns coming in, and I always ask them at the end of their, summer with me. I'm like, so what did you think? Do you want to be an estate planning lawyer? And they're like, I mean, this is something I could see myself doing when I'm older, like when I'm thinking of retiring. I want to do something interesting and help people. And I'm like, this isn't interesting? You don't think we help people? I take it a little personally, but they're more into like criminal law or family law. I guess it's more sexy or more or litigation. So a lot of the younger generation really, this isn't their jam. And, so I don't know about you, but here in Florida, a lot of the estate planning attorneys are a lot older than me and really are retiring. Yeah.
Well, I think, litigators get like 5 years into practice and they think, how can I get into estate planning?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. They need to be doing this and then realize, this isn't that bad, after you
Yeah.
do family law for 5 years,
Right.
you're like, oh my God, what I would like to see my family.
It's a wonderful practice area. I think what makes it difficult is the marketing. You mentioned that marketing is your jam. And I think because there is a lot of demand from people wanting to transfer maybe from other practice areas or whatever, um, you have to be really good at marketing to succeed in it. And I think you're probably naturally talented in marketing. So probably a lot of the things that you do are sort of invisible to yourself. By the way, I want to learn more about this acquisition strategy and how it relates to your marketing. But quick question, I'm curious. I think you're patent barred as well, right? And you've worked in IBM. What made you go into estate planning rather than take the IP route?
So I sat for the patent bar exam because I could.
Mhm.
It's a
Right.
very difficult bar to even qualify for
Right.
because your undergrad has to be in biology, chemistry, or engineering. So I happen to have a biology undergrad, so I could sit for it. So you have to have this technical background. You have
Mhm.
to, go to law school. You have to pass a bar, and then you can qualify to sit for it. And it's considered one of the hardest bars. So I was like, of course I'm going to take it. And at the time, I was working for IBM, which is the world's largest patent holder at the time. I don't
Oh,
know if it
really?
still is. And I thought this would be a good backup. If all else fails, I'm a terrible stripper. I'll go into this. I'll be a patent lawyer, right?
Uh-huh.
But it took me 7 tries to pass that bar, mostly because I refused to study. I was like, I can do this. I don't need to study. And
Wow,
there's
but
no
you kept
really
doing
good.
it 7 times.
Well, you
Awesome.
could take it as many times as you
Good for
want,
you.
back in the yeah, yeah, yeah. So I took it and I took it and I took it and finally I passed.
Mhm.
And they tell you, like, they give you the percentage of how close you were. And I was like, just like 4 points away. And I'm like, oh.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of those tests. And it's not something that you need continuing education for. So once you're in, you're in,
Mm.
it's kind of like, yeah. But I never felt the passion or the burning desire to write patents all day long. To me, it was a backup. If all else fails, I can always go into patent law because the number of female patent lawyers, I don't know how it is now, but at the time you can kind of count them. It was like a couple hundred in all of America. There weren't that many minority patent attorneys. So for me, it was kind of like a point of pride. Like I
Mm.
could do this, and should I ever not have any, any way to make money? I'm an immigrant, so I'm always thinking of a backup to a backup to a
Yeah.
backup. If everything goes into the shitter, I'll have this.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's actually interesting you mentioned that because I advise a lot of small businesses. That's a lot of my clientele, and I I suppose over the years, for whatever reason, I have developed a little bit of a niche advising immigrant-owned small businesses, and I've noticed that a lot of immigrant-owned small businesses, uh, the business owners choose that particular industry because they think it'll be a profitable business and provide um, a good profit and a good living for them. Whereas a lot of people who start businesses who are not immigrants, I've noticed, are just doing it to follow their passion rather
Oh yeah.
than
Oh yeah.
doing something they think the market will bear.
The immigrant mentality is a real thing, just like farmer mentality, it's a thing. For me, estate planning is one of those things that is never going to go out of style because if somebody doesn't do the estate planning, that's okay. I'll catch you on the probate end. I do probate too. We'll see you later.
Right.
Like if you don't want to do
That's
estate
true.
planning, that's fine. You don't have to. I'll see you later, kind of a thing. And it kind of also sells itself. Once I tell people the rules, the laws of how it's going to be, they're like, oh yeah, I need this. It's not like, do you want this? It's more of when are we going to do it? Are we going to adult now or are we going to adult later?
Right.
So
That's right.
for me, it was a no-brainer, right? Kind of like almost like family law, it kind of sells itself. Like
Hmm.
do you want to stick with this guy or I'll see you later when you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about marketing a little bit more. You mentioned when you were teaching continuing education classes, you got everybody's email and then you'd send them holiday blasts or whatever. What I remember, you have a very sophisticated email operation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. It's called Constant Contact.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is every Friday, and I pick Friday because a lot of people don't send out their newsletters on Friday. They want to do it on Monday or Tuesday, but I'm like, read me over the weekend. I'm
Mm-hmm.
cool. So every Friday, I send out a newsletter talking about pop culture and relating it to Florida law. So, what happens with, Nicole Kidman
Yeah.
or Leonardo DiCaprio and kind of making it relevant to any new statutes that have come out or case laws or anything important that, people want to, read about. And honestly, this is my jam because if we're talking about religion, I love this stuff. So for me, it is this part of it is my passion. I do love to take something so guttural like reality TV and like,
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous things and then elevate it to the point where it's educational
Right.
and we can actually learn from it. So my newsletter is called What Can We Learn From? And,
Mm.
I send it out and I've collected these contacts, all willing, since I guess 2000. And
Mm.
they've, kind of have stuck with me. And now I'm to the point where I send out 11,000 emails to these people, and about 44 to 45% actually open them and read my newsletters. The numbers are tricky because it's hard to know if they're actually reading it or if they're just opening it. But, that's a big number. And it kind of keeps me top of mind with people. They don't hate my newsletters, I would say, because it's, somewhat snarky and a little bit juicy, right? We're telling like some secrets and hopefully we're learning from it. That's the name of the game.
So
Yeah.
that is a really strong open rate. And for people who are unfamiliar with email marketing, that's incredibly important because it affects your deliverability. Are your emails going to go to people's spam folder or their promotions tab of Gmail? It largely depends on the open rate. And the reason you have a high open rate is because you are writing about things that people are interested in reading about. So if you were just to send out an email every week that said, here's what a revocable living trust is, you would not have that open rate. But since you relate it
No.
to pop culture and people are like, this is an interesting read, I'll scroll through this, then it's going to help your deliverability.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun for me, also like I don't take myself too seriously, which helps, so there's some typos, yeah, and people tell me, "Oh, you misspelled this," or and I'm like, "Well, that's how
Mhm.
you know I write them, sir."
That's
That's how you
exactly
know
right.
that it's legitimate. Yeah,
ChatGPT
my
doesn't
daughter.
have typos.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
So my daughter actually like took a screenshot and she's like, "Oh, mommy, I'm so sorry you have a typo." And I'm like, "Well, thank you for reading." Oh, that touched my I can't believe my daughter is reading my newsletter. That to me is like the best compliment she could ever give me. Because
Mhm.
she's 20 and what
Good
does she
point.
have, but she's like, "Well, you wrote about this and that, so I wanted to read it." And I'm like, "Aw."
You know, a lot of I think this podcast is really about courage because it takes courage to start your own business, and it really takes courage
Absolutely.
to send out a mass email. That is a nerve-wracking thing to do, so you just gotta let go. It's not gonna be
Yeah,
perfect, it's
yeah.
okay, it's an email.
I once early on, I sent an email. I don't remember who the person I was writing about, but I misspelled his name the entire time. And one person, one of my clients sent back and said, "At least you could do is get his name right." And I'm like, "That's how you know I wrote it."
Perfect response. Yeah. Okay.
What do
S
you
so that's one of the
We'll do
things
better
that you
next time.
and how do you connect having that huge email list with a great open rate to bringing money into the business?
Well, first of all, I'm top of mind, right? So, in the beginning intro of the email, I'm like, "Hey, it's January. We survived. Congratulations. We're all still here."
Mhm,
And then I say, while we're surviving, we're also working on your estate planning, your probate, and your real estate, just
mhm,
so that people constantly get reminded of what it is that I do. So I'd like to think that I stay top of mind, and I think that I do because a lot
mhm.
of times when people reply to me, they're replying to an email that I sent them, right? They're like, "Oh, by the way, I need to update my trust," or, "Oh, my brother
Interesting.
passed. Do you practice in whatever state?" So they're
Mhm.
replying to me not from the documents that I sent them. They're replying from my email. So that
Right.
means that they're just looking for my name or they saved it. Or a lot of times they say to me, "Oh, can you add my brother to this list? I want I keep forwarding this to my friend. Do you think you could just add her to your distribution?" So that happens
Mm.
quite a bit.
Mm,
And
cool.
of course, I have a few people that reply to me, and they're like, "Oh, this is really nice. Thank you." The new people that, if
Mhm.
somebody encounters me and I add them onto the list, all with their permission,
Right.
then they reply and they're like, "Oh, wow, this is really great information. Thank you." So the feedback that I get tends to be good. And I do have some unsubscribes, which, I'm happy, but it tends to be about 8 to 10 a month. And let's say I add maybe 50 to 60 a month.
Right.
So the rate of unsubscribe is significantly, it makes sense. It's not
Mhm.
like it's not problematic in that nobody unsubscribes. It's the right amount. Yeah, for what it is that I do.
2 things about unsubscribes. You can't live your life, letting that hurt your feelings. And
Oh
2, it's
no.
actually a good thing from the perspective of it keeps your list clean, which keeps your open rate high. You don't
Yeah.
want a bunch of people who don't want your emails on your list. You want a clean
Yeah.
list, keep that open rate high, keep the deliverability high. How do you muster the self-discipline to write those did you say every week?
Well, I give myself 30 minutes on a Monday, and if the magic happens, the magic happens. If it doesn't happen, I'm a lawyer first and foremost, so I have to practice law, right? I'm
Right.
not a marketing email. It's not like I'm selling my email newsletters every month to someone. So there are weeks where I just don't get to it. I'm too busy, or I'm not feeling it, or if it's a holiday, because the newsletter doesn't celebrate any holiday other than Groundhog's Day. That's the holiday we celebrate
Okay.
in the newsletter.
Nice.
It started as a joke with an ex-boyfriend who loved Groundhog's Day, and I was like, "This is our holiday," and then it just became a thing that every holiday we're like, "Yay, it's Groundhog's Day, guys." So, if it's a big holiday, then I don't send out a newsletter because, one of the things I don't wanna do is alienate my audience, right? And be
Mm.
like, "Oh, it's this holiday and 50% don't celebrate it," or, take any
Right.
political
Yeah, sure.
stance or make the object is to poke fun at celebrities, to take their traumas and make them funny or educational. That's really the goal of the newsletter.
So you just set aside time to do it and
Yeah.
you forgive yourself if it doesn't happen and you try again next week?
Oh, That's the difference between a perfectionist and an overachiever is
Mm,
an overabundance of forgiveness of self and others, because I've met a lot of perfectionists and I'm like, how am I not a perfectionist? And it's just because, well, I make mistakes all the time and so does
yeah.
everybody else. And then I'm ready to just forgive myself immediately. Unending forgiveness of self and others. It's a cornerstone to success.
That is wonderful. And I think it's maybe a little bit counter to attorney culture because we're in large part an error avoidance type profession. And, yeah, we've got a perfectionist streak, I think, as a professional culture. And so it's a different mentality for running a business, where it's not about error
Especially
avoidance. It's about making good things happen regardless of your batting average.
Yeah, but especially in marketing, in
Mm-hmm.
marketing, there's mistakes. Again, I tried all kinds of things to see what worked and what didn't work. Turns out I do not enjoy speaking to realtors because it just wasn't something I was passionate about.
Hmm.
Closings and that sort of thing really wasn't my forte. I didn't really enjoy speaking to accountants about their continuing education. It just, I'm more invested in talking to people about protecting their estate plan, right? And I do consider myself an educator,
Yes.
but you have to find the right audience that fits. So there's a lot of mistakes that we make, especially in marketing, but even in the practice. But I find that even when you make a mistake, there's nothing that can't be corrected, right? Everything could be corrected with the affidavit usually, but honestly, we
Yeah.
spend a lot of time correcting other people's mistakes too. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it happens. And yeah, you just keep trying to move forward and not dwell on it. You mentioned teaching. I think a good lawyer is a good teacher because you have to counsel your clients.
Yes.
If you're
Yes.
litigating, certainly you have to teach the
Yeah.
jury or the judge, the fact finder. Being able to communicate, being able to teach is important for any practice area. And I
Mhm.
want people to look at you and how you've built your practice and realize how valuable it can be for marketing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do consider myself an educator. When people come in, I tell them I'm bossy. So I'm happy to tell them what to do at no charge. I start charging when I draft paper. That's really when I
Hmm.
start, billing people. So if people want to call me and ask me, how should I do this? How should I do that? I'm like, here's what I would do. I'm happy to give advice freely. But also above and beyond, even when they do pay me for drafting documents, I spend 90% of the time educating them on what is probate,
Yeah.
what a will does, what a will doesn't do, where to keep your documents, who to tell what to. All of that is just education. And, that's why I'm not as concerned with AI taking over my practice, because even
Yeah.
though AI could, draft these documents, it's really hard to understand what's going on unless you have a human there
Yeah.
explaining it, answering questions, making sure you understand, at the beginning of every meeting, I tell people, all right, our plan today is going to be to go over the documents and then see how we feel. If we feel good, we'll call in the witnesses, we'll sign, witness, notarize. And if we don't, today will be just the review. There's no pressure. And you can literally see the relief on their face. They're like, oh my gosh, thank gosh,
Nice.
because
Yeah.
they up until now they were like, oh my God, what if we're not ready? What if we don't want to sign? What's she gonna do? What are we gonna do here today? I mean, 99% of the time we do execute at the end of the meeting, but just that option of checking in and saying, all right, how do we feel? Shall we call in our witnesses? And then they say, yes, we're good. Just that tiny nuance of asking. AI would never think to do that.
Yeah.
AI can't gauge their facial expression as we're going through it to see, like how they're doing, if they're frustrated, if they're happy, if they're bored, if, they
Yet.
have questions. Well, even if it does, for me, it's, maybe because I'm not using it correctly, but from my perspective, it's a good additive, but it's
Yeah.
not a replacement.
No, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. And I mean, I'm just joking around, but I think that this is a high stakes enough practice area in particular where people, people aren't going to trust AI to do it by and large. And even if the attorney is using some AI assisted drafting software or something, people want people want a human to say, I got you. And another
Yeah.
advantage that estate planning attorneys have in the age of AI is that all the terms are really confusing and really similar. A will is
Yes.
completely different from a living will. A testamentary
Yes.
trust is completely different from what we might just call a
Living
trust, a
trust.
revocable
Yep.
living trust. The rules for revocable and irrevocable are completely different, and one would be wildly inappropriate for most families. So that sort of thing is what I think is really good job security in the age of AI for a good educator estate planner.
I agree. Yeah, I don't worry about it, and,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I've got my head in the sand, but that's kind of how I see it.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think, you know, it's less something to worry about. And in my view, more something to be excited about how it could make our jobs easier when it comes
Yes.
to the things that are not the real professional legal judgment, the client counseling, but just sort of the pain in the neck stuff that takes time out of your day.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I use it, as an additive. Absolutely.
So we
Yeah.
really haven't talked about this whole acquisition strategy that is just completely different. I mean, from my practice and from some of the other people I've talked to in this podcast. So tell us all about this completely different way to build a practice. It's worked out great for you. Tell us your thought process and how you pull it off.
So I'd love to say that this was a brilliant idea I had, and I kind of put it into practice, but it kind of is a mistake, much like everything that's happened thus far. When I moved down here, like I said, it was kind of hard for me to find my footing and to find a really good way to market and get the clients that I was looking for. And I saw an ad in the paper, and it was an older attorney, and he was, like in the paper, in the
Wow.
Florida Bar newspaper back in the day. And it said, if you're interested, submit this letter to this PO box. So I wrote a letter and I mailed it to him in the PO box, and he opened it up. And I'm like, listen, I'm really interested in buying your law practice. I just moved to Florida. I just passed the bar exam. I'm so excited. Give me a chance. And he did. And we met. And I remember telling my boyfriend, and I was like, I think I'm going to buy this guy's practice. And he was like, well, he was an IT guy. He said, let's build him a computer. And I said, no, no, he's retiring. He's not, he doesn't want to come into the office. And he said, well, let me just build him a desk. And I said, no, no, don't worry about it. And we fought about it. And at one point, I'm like, God, this guy's so freaking annoying. I need to break up with him. But he built him a work, a computer in the office. And wouldn't you know, after he retired for a year, he came back and
Mm.
he started working on clients, and he was happy. He was coming in 3 4 days a week, and I was doing my thing and he was doing his thing. And then a couple of years later, another attorney, same newspaper, was looking to retire, and I approached her, and she was like, yeah, but I'm not sure if I want to retire. And I said, well, listen, I did this thing with Steve, and he comes into the office. And she's like, well, maybe that sounds good. And so we kind of worked out an arrangement, and most of these are small, because in estate planning, it's not like we have repeatable business. It's not like accounting or financial planning that every year there's kind of, it's, you do a will and then you wait for someone to pass away, or maybe there's an amendment to a trust here and there, but it's not like a book of business that they're giving me. Really, what they're giving me is their email address, their website, and their phone number, really, and some of their files, right? A lot of these
Okay.
people really didn't have much digital files. They were giving me safe deposit boxes full of wills. That's what they were
Okay.
handing over.
So
Yeah,
that
it was like a lot
people's
of paper.
executors come to you when it's time to probate something or when they have questions or for
Yeah,
even
we don't
administering a
do that
trust.
anymore.
Okay.
We don't keep originals anymore. But back in the day,
Yeah.
these people were already in their 70s, 80s when I was buying their practice. So they, started, maybe 40, 50 years ago, when the practice was for attorneys not only to put themselves in the documents, but to hang on to the originals. In Florida, that's less of a practice. There's only
Mm.
a few counties that continue to do that. But most attorneys give the people the originals, and that's how we work it. So it became a business model that even though the attorneys were quote unquote retiring, they were still coming into the office and practicing. So really what they were, giving me is their files and their phone number and their goodwill. And I was giving them freedom so that they could work on the files that they wanted, on the clients that they wanted, but they didn't have to deal with the inventory and the printer and the payroll. They
Right.
could just do the things that they wanted to do, which was practice law. They didn't have to run a business anymore. They didn't have to worry
Hmm.
about all the things that they didn't want to do. And that became the business model, is this, flexibility and this freedom for them to be able to come into the office when and if they wanted, and for me to kind of keep their legacy going so that when
Hmm.
someone called the office, they would be able to access their wills, their estate plans, and it wasn't just going to a void or to an abyss. So it happened. And, if I buy an estate plan every 2 years, it's a lot, So I've handled five so far to date. And it worked out perfectly. Some really do retire, but most folks, most attorneys, don't really retire. They just kind of slow down.
And if they keep working a little bit, at that point, they're working for your firm.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
They're working for me. They're considered of counsel to my
Okay.
practice. They're on my insurance.
Uh-huh.
But the idea is that they have this flexibility. They're not, kind of stuck to the office, but they can still come in when they want.
I think it's a really interesting concept and certainly relevant to our listeners, whether they are starting up or even thinking about winding down somewhere down the road. What do you buy when you buy a law firm? So you mentioned for these folks, you were buying essentially their phone number, their email address, their website, their goodwill.
Yeah.
Attorneys who build up significant systems are sometimes able to sell the practice because of the workflows they have created. Um, if you were ever to sell your practice, depending on your agreement and so forth, but that email list could be part of the bundle of what is sold potentially with your practice.
Yeah, it depends. All the attorneys that I worked with had a retirement situation, so this practice wasn't their retirement plan. So
Oh,
they'd either invested in real estate, they were stock, into the stock market, so they had kind of, already had some kind of retirement plan outside of their practice. They owned their
mm-hmm,
building, for example, things like
mm-hmm,
that. So it was small potatoes to them. They just really wanted to hand it over to someone that would take care of this baby that they, created, so to speak.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And sometimes, I think to myself, probably if I get into the plan situation, the subscription mindset, and I toyed around with the idea of a legal plan where clients could pay $1,000 a year or whatever, and they get a certain amount of hours or a certain estate plan review or whatnot. And then, it's a repeatable model. It would be easier to sell the practice down the road. But, you got to kind of have that mindset. And I'm more of, I want to get them in and then get them out. I don't want to be married to these people. I want them to have me as a reference. So if they
Right.
have any questions or, but in my head, I'm not looking for that type of arrangement with my clients. Also, I'm volume based. So I have,
Right.
maybe new clients a day. For me, it would be really hard to keep up with that repeatable model, even though later down the road in 20 or 30 years, that does make the practice a lot more marketable if I wanted to sell the practice. But from my perspective, this really isn't my retirement, to be honest with you. My retirement lies elsewhere. Yeah.
So you have bought 5 practices. That tells me that you have been happy with buying practices and that it's worked out well for you. So you must have found that it does actually bring in a significant number of clients with this setup you have.
Yes, especially one of the practices was doing legal insurance. So this was the first time that I started to take legal insurance, right?
Mm,
And because he had such good reviews, it kind of catapulted me. And of course, I helped, right? My reviews are good too. So we became kind of like a great participant in this insurance plan. And then, as you know, that's how you and I kind of met. So
mm,
each practice kind of gave me, like, the first practice legitimized me. It really made me a lawyer, right? Because before
right.
then it was just like me, like, hey, look at me. Do you want an estate plan? So the first practice really gave me some legitimacy. The second practice provided me a big network of, she was very focused on clients that were first generational families that came to South Florida. So she had a huge network of clients that were really great business owners, and that kind of opened up that door for me. And of course, as they were passing away, I was doing their probate, and then I was also working with their children's estate plan. And so now I'm on to the third generation, which makes me
Wow.
feel very old. But yeah, so each practice kind of opened up a new door. One
Interesting.
practice that I purchased was only real estate. So with them, I got a brokerage firm that referred a lot of business, and I still keep in touch
Mm.
with those realtors. They still continue to refer a lot of business. So each practice had its own niche and kind of provided a bigger kind of breadth of area for me. So yeah, for me, it worked out really well.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
so there's a learning aspect as well. With each practice, you learn what has worked for that practice, whether it's, the strong referral opportunities that come from serving a community or,
Yeah.
or a brokerage firm or legal insurance. I sometimes feel like on this podcast, when I'm doing these interviews, or when I'm doing videos about how to start a law firm, it's almost like I talk about legal insurance too much. Like I'm they're not a sponsor. I just think in fact, it's against my interest in some sense to promote it because
I know,
like I want
right?
all the
Well,
cases.
there's plenty of business.
Right. But it just really is a good idea, I think, especially for sort of a
Absolutely.
volume-based practice. I mean, my only financial thing, I'm promoting my uh, practice to my case management software, and we have features for trying to make it more efficient to file claims and get those cases and all that sort of thing. Whether it's legal insurance or just any sort of volume practice, really the name of the game is efficiency so that you can keep your quality
Yes.
high but remain profitable, so that you're spending your time on legal work and the actual like highest level of thinking and service
Yeah.
you can do, and not on the minutia, the administrativia.
Absolutely.
Practiced is the first practice management system designed to make it easier to accept legal insurance cases and get paid for them. Without Practiced, you'd have to go into the insurance company's website to get the case information, then manually enter all the case details into your practice management software, and then remember to log back into the legal insurance website after your client signs with you and accept each case in their system to prevent other attorneys from claiming it. Then, when you're finished with a case, you'd have to gather your materials from that case, such as your timesheet and any supporting docs, and once again, log back into the insurance company's system to file the claim. Practiced does all that for you. You can simply search for the case, either by case number or client name, and Practiced auto-populates all your case details. Your engagement letter is automatically tailored to the case and fee type, and you can send it to your client with the click of a button. When the client signs, the matter status automatically updates to open, and Practiced automatically accepts the case in the insurance company's system so that no other attorney can snatch it from you. When you're ready to get paid, you can easily mark it ready and Practiced. Then you or your admin can file the claim with just a few clicks directly from inside Practiced. Practiced automatically connects with the insurance company website and provides all the information the insurance company needs to process your claim and get you paid.
We're constantly trying to, automate the emails that we send out with the drafts,
Uh-huh.
and also the
Right.
links so people can schedule appointments, and it
Right.
updates automatically. So it's a lot of automation happening on the back end. And,
Yeah.
obviously the clients that are from the legal insurance understand process because they work for corporations.
Right.
So we do get feedback on people say, "Oh, you have a good process here," and I'm like, "Oh, you're corporate," and
Yeah.
I'm taking my corporate information and kind of applying it here. But yeah, definitely automation is key for sure.
That's
For
funny.
sure, you can't do what I do in a volume-based environment. For me, it's only me. I'm the only lawyer, and I have 8
Yeah.
paralegals. So we got to kind of streamline the process and make it make sense.
That's
Yeah.
another difference. We are completely inverted in
Oh, yeah?
that we're mostly attorneys. Tell us about your model for, and the reason we're mostly attorneys is we do revenue sharing compensation. So all of our attorneys are revenue drivers for the firm. So
Oh,
that's why
nice.
we keep our staffing really lean and try to do as much as
Lean.
possible through technology for that. You have a totally inverted model. You are the only attorney, and how many paralegals?
8.
8 paralegals. And then, of course, the of counsel attorneys from whom you've purchased the practices. But but as far as full-time attorneys, it's you and 8 paralegals. Tell us about how you work
Well,
that model.
sadly, the attorneys, really either did retire or passed away. So it's
Mm.
really only me. I don't have any
Wow.
of counsels. Yeah,
So
which is
like,
sad because they were
yeah,
my mentors. Yeah.
yeah. I'm
It's a
sorry to
bummer.
hear that.
Yeah, so it's only me and 8 paralegals, and it works. Sometimes I'm the bottleneck, obviously, because I
Hmm.
meet with every client. I do all their intakes and I do all their draft reviews. And of course, I review everything before it leaves the door, but I don't generate documents, right? I don't draft anything and I don't collect information. So once I put the plan together, then I pass it over to the paralegal to kind of pull the information, get it the way we want it, and draft the document. And then I review it, I send it to the client, and I go over everything with them. So, yeah, I'm very hands-on, but I'm not a drafter, right? If I'm drafting a will, the system is broken, something's wrong.
So it's all client touch stuff. I know there are some estate planning attorneys who, for efficiency, and I've heard this, even preached, is they won't be at the signing ceremony. They
Really?
will, yeah, they will have, gone over the final documents with the client and answered any questions. And when once the client says, "Okay, these look good to me, I'm ready to sign," they say, "Okay, we'll have you schedule a signing with our office." And then it's just all paralegals or legal assistants, notary, and 2 witnesses, and the attorney isn't there. But you don't do
Listen, to
that
each
at all.
no, because for me, if I'm going over it with them, it's just a couple of minutes for us to sign here, sign here, sign here. We have the
Mm-hmm.
execution ceremony. So for me, the going over is the hard part, right? It takes me 45
Mm-hmm.
minutes to go over an estate plan with someone and 7 minutes to execute it. So we're
Mm.
already here in person. A lot of times we do I do not a lot. Sometimes I'll review it with the clients via Zoom or Teams, and then they come in, but I'm still in there. I'm the notary, right? Because the
Oh yeah.
paralegals might leave, and then I'm there to say I was there. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm with them throughout. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good idea. So you're the notary, and then you have 2 paralegals as the witnesses.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We
cool.
do everything just at once. I meet my clients one time to do the intake. And then we draft the documents. I email it to them to review. And
Hmm.
then we meet one time to go over everything paragraph by paragraph. And then we execute, hopefully at the end. If not, then we reschedule the execution for another day, but it's still me.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who aren't in the estate planning world or document signing world find execution kind of a startling term. Like, in the Air Force, we do wills for all the members who are deploying, and then we have a big signing ceremony with all of them, like kind of in an arena, and we call it a mass execution. But anyway,
I love that. I'm very morbid. So for me, this is my humor. Are you kidding me? I say execution intentionally.
yeah, this is self-serving because I build products for lawyers, so I always want to
Right.
know, like, what's your dream, your wish list. I'm always trying to gather information on what people want. Like, what parts of your process are roadblocks that you think, wouldn't it be great if technology could just do
Yeah.
this? What is
Yeah.
that for you now?
So, again, we integrated the document generation process and then
Yeah,
also the sending out of the automatic emails. So
right.
now it's kind of the financial aspect of it, linking my financial accounting software to this new tool so that when people pay me, it automatically updates their account information and I don't have to manually go back and forth between the systems. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of next level.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. Yeah, it is. That is a common theme that I hear is the tech stack, all of the different s- pieces of software that you need to run a law firm.
Yeah.
Lawyers are saying, just simplify my tech stack. I just want one login that does all the stuff I need to run my firm. So that's what we're always
Yeah, but it's a
thinking
good
about.
time to be alive, let me tell
Oh
you,
yeah.
because the technology is there. And if you're savvy and you're not fearful, then definitely you could definitely do a lot of really great stuff. I find that
Hmm.
I don't know about your practice area, but in estate planning, again, most of the attorneys are older. They're not really for me, I hate to say this because this is going on the internet, but I don't really have much competition. I really don't, you know. When
Uh-huh.
people call around for lawyers
Yeah.
in my area, I'm the only one that calls them back. So
Yep.
it's low hanging fruit for me. So all this stuff that I do in terms of marketing and technology and streamlining process, it's just to keep me, up here from going crazy saying the same 10 things over and over again. It's me kind of challenging myself and
Right.
seeing, how much fun I can have and
Yeah.
investing back in me because where else am I going to invest? I'm going to invest in me, so
Yeah.
things like that. But ultimately speaking, I don't know about you, but I find it very easy to make people happy just by returning their phone call.
You're not
Yeah,
the
some
first person
you
to say
come
that on
back
this
and they're like,
podcast,
"Oh
which
my
is
gosh, thank
amazing.
you so much for calling me back." And I'm like, "You're welcome. You did call me though, so of course I'm going to call you back." But you'd be surprised at that just tiny effort of
Yeah.
returning people's phone call or emailing them back makes me a great lawyer in my area.
Yeah,
I can't explain.
it's amazing. It really is amazing.
Yeah.
That in some cases that's all it takes to win the case. If you put yourself
Yeah.
in a client's shoes, it's actually not that easy to find a lawyer, particularly one that you can trust, who's not going to price gouge you or whatever. It's not that easy to find a lawyer if you have a legal need.
Yeah, I hear that, but even not just a lawyer. Like, God forbid
Hmm.
you need a plumber or an electrician,
Right.
or a carpenter. Good luck to you, And again, I don't know if this is a South Florida thing or if this is, I don't know, but I find that people are very busy. I guess they
Mm-hmm.
have their phones and they have a lot of stimulus. So, when a message comes in, potentially they feel like they've already responded when they didn't, and then they just forget about it. I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why people don't get back to people. It's weird to me, but I'm not on social media and I don't watch the news, so I have plenty of time. So I find that, for me, it's just very obvious, just common courtesy. If somebody calls you, call them back. If they email you, you email them back. Even if it's not something I want to do or I can do, I try very hard not to reject people because a lot of people have abandonment issues. You don't want to trigger that. So even when I don't do something, I send them referrals or I try to tell them where they can get help so that it's not like a wasted call to me because that would be the worst. Somebody calls me and I'm like, I hate you, goodbye, or just no, I don't do that. And then you
Yeah.
hang up on them. That's not nice, So I take the time to hear them out. Even though I say this isn't my area of law, but go ahead and tell me what it is that's going on. And, maybe I could refer you to someone that can do it or tell you what searches you need to do. Instead of looking for a real estate attorney, look for a real estate quiet title action
Right.
attorney or real estate litigation
Yeah.
attorney. That's going to narrow your search. And then also ask them, do you have the time for this? How many cases do you do? So I kind of point them in the right direction
Nice.
so that I don't trigger their abandonment issues because, people are weird.
Yeah, so you give them some of the tools that it takes to find a lawyer. Those are some of the things that make it difficult. But it's
Yeah.
nice from our perspective. We are the supply. It's nice to know that there is sometimes limited supply because it's difficult to find a lawyer, and that's certainly an advantage to us. And it's just right there for the taking.
Yeah.
Just got to reach out and take it. So, what is your what is one what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's thinking about starting their firm now?
I think I would say first focus on where you're going to get your clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the logo, the website, your colors, that's all exciting and that's fun. But really, once you hang a shingle, you have to have kind of an idea of where you're going to get your people, whether it's mailings, whether, of course, bar approved, because I don't know about you,
Right.
but in Florida, we have to go through that, whether it's seminars, whether it's poster boards, whether it's commercials, whether it's, find your niche to differentiate yourself and also learn about the industry in your area, see, and you can hire a good web guy. I've got a great web guy and he constantly tells me what everyone around me is doing. He's like, all right, so this guy has 6% of the share, he's very technical into his
Okay.
numbers, and we can
Yeah.
take his share, but then we got to, increase the marketing of this. And I'm like, all right, buddy, so he's very into his numbers, and he's always crunching and always figuring out, what percentage of what and who gets what. And, so that's easy to do on an online perspective. Figure out your target area, figure out how you're going to market to that target area online, because, you do have to have a little bit of budget, not a lot, doesn't have to be breaking the bank, but you have to have an online presence. People need to be able to find you. If I find a lawyer doesn't have a website, to me that's weird. That's
Mhm.
very weird. It's like, why doesn't this lawyer have a website? What is going on? Unless they're in their late 70s, and then it's like, okay, that makes sense. But for a young lawyer to not have a website in 2025, it's like they're hiding something. That's weird to me. So
Yeah, it's
you
so
have to
cheap
have
and
an
easy
online.
too. You don't need much budget
It's
just to
low
have a
hanging
website.
fruit. People need to find you. People need to put you in maps. People need to be able to write a Google review. You have to make that easy for people. And even if it's like one or two or five or 10, you build that up. You get your
Mhm.
friends to write you good reviews. They know you, they know you've done a good job, so you kind of build up your online presence, because that's kind of, we used to have the phone book back in the day, right? People could look you up in the phone book. This is our global phone book. So, I think just understanding your market area, understanding how you're going to get your clients, how you're going to market to them, how are they going to find you, and getting into that aspect of things for me is everything. Because again, you could have an amazing logo, but if nobody is calling, then what's the point?
Mm. That's absolutely right. That piece on the website, it doesn't cost too much, like I said. And a piece of advice that stuck with me from when I did a CLE about hanging your shingle when I first started out with this practice, which was in 2014, is that often what your website is for, sure, it's for search engine optimization for people to find you, but it's also for sort of corroboration. If someone is referred to your practice, they're going to Google you before they call you to see what you're all about. And
That's
so
exactly.
you want at least a professional presence there. It's so easy. You don't even have to hire someone to do that. You can do it for probably $15 or something like that. Put up a professional looking website. There are a lot of, ways to cut corners on the cost aspect, but you do need some web presence. I would say for the first 5 years of my practice, I did not get any clients from the internet. It was all from referrals, but I still had a good web presence because of that corroboration aspect.
Yeah.
So, by the way, that's another way in which it just shows there is more than one way to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of the attorneys I talk to in this podcast have built their practice on Google Ads and
Yeah.
on internet marketing. I just didn't do that for a long time. Now we do it, but you know, it's there. There's enough demand for high quality legal services that there are multiple avenues for you to build. Just as you've seen from the practices you've built, there are many ways to do it and to sort of build a road between the clients and your firm.
Absolutely. I know a lot of clients, for me, it's different because I'm in estate planning, but a lot of the litigation attorneys, they come to us, they come
Right?
to the transactional attorneys, and we're their referral sources because, again, I don't litigate, thank God, praise the Lord. So
Yeah.
when somebody doesn't know, and they're
Yeah.
looking for a probate litigation attorney, they call me because I'm a probate attorney and I'm top of list because of
Right.
my organic Google reviews and because of some of the marketing I've done.
Yeah.
The newsletter links to my website. So when people open the newsletter, they get brought to my website, which drives up my website. So organically, I'm typically
Mm-hmm.
in the top of the list. So people call me for all kinds of stuff, and then I refer them to these litigation attorneys. So from a litigation perspective, it makes sense to know who your referral sources are
Yeah.
and to reach out to them, to take them to lunch, to take them to coffee. During
Right.
Christmas time, we get a lot of,
Yeah.
gifts and whatnot from the litigation attorneys. And I don't take referral fees. For me, it's like, just take care of this lunatic. basic. You
Right.
know, if you take care of them, we're good. You know, you don't need to pay me because I'm not a realtor. I'm not a broker that gets paid on connecting people. To me, it's just, being a decent human. If I can't help you, here's the person that can. So, that you have to know where your referral sources are too. So if it's a transactional attorney, or if you're real estate litigation attorney, then you got to hit up all those closing attorneys, right? Because they're the ones that are going to drive the business to you.
Right.
If you're a family lawyer, then you got to reach out to all the estate planning lawyers, because they call us thinking we're the family lawyers.
Mm.
So we're a big referral source for them. And I hit up all the family lawyers because at some point when the family divorces, they each need an estate plan.
2
So
estate
I have
plans. Yeah.
yeah, two estate plans. Well, I can only do one.
Oh, that's right.
So
Of course. Yeah.
we have a targeting, marketing that goes out just to family lawyers. And then I have one that goes out just to litigation attorneys talking about probate, because sometimes in the middle of litigation, people pass away and they need an emergency estate, probate.
Mhm.
An estate open via probate. So, we have our targeted mailings towards those because they're referral sources back to me. So, you got to know your area and who's going to refer you, whether it's not just the client in the internet or buying a practice or legal insurance, but other lawyers are a great network. So, if you can
Yes.
find it in your heart to go out and meet other lawyers, you could do yourself a big service. You got to be that social person sometimes.
Where can people find you? How do they get on your email list?
Oh, yeah. So I'm Odelia at ogoldberglaw.com. That's my website. I mean, my email. My website is ogoldberglaw.com. Don't forget the O, because if you do, it doesn't come to me. And then on the website, you can click to sign up to the newsletter. And if you hate it, you can unsubscribe. No hard feelings. Yeah, but I'm not on any social media. Thank God, praise the Lord. I'm not. I mean, we do some advertising, but it's not like me in there looking at comments. And so, if you want me, you got to call me or email me.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate you.